Unlike Mozart or Beethoven, Franz Peter Schubert was not born into a family of professional musicians. And yet, music making was still a family activity for him growing up. His brothers Ignaz and Ferdinand both played violin, and his father, Franz Theodor Schubert, a schoolmaster by trade, enjoyed playing the cello as an amateur. The young Franz Peter first began learning violin from his father, and at age 14 he joined the family quartet as a violist. This was by no means a professional affair. In fact, it followed the model of most types of chamber music making during his time. Amateur musicians playing with each other in the comforts of their own homes, with composers publishing works catering to their skill levels. The early string quartets of Franz Schubert were most definitely written for his family band to be read and enjoyed domestically, and none of them were published during his lifetime. And yet, if we zoom out from his earlier years and look at the last three quartets Schubert wrote, we see something quite different. His A minor quartet, nicknamed Rosamunde, his D minor quartet, Death and a Maiden, and G major quartet were all written within 4 years before his much too early passing in 1828 at the age of 31. These are works most definitely not written with the amateur musician in mind. Heavily inspired by the astonishing output of Beethoven's late period, these are ambitious pieces, expansive both harmonically and spatially, with an intensity of emotional expression and formal experimentation that goes beyond the comforts of a domestic reading party. Late in life, looking backwards, Schubert clearly felt a similar divide between his earlier and later quartets. In July of 1824, Franz wrote to his brother Ferdinand, who was revisiting Franz's early quartets, "But it would be better if you stuck to quartets other than mine, since they don't amount to much, except that perhaps they please you, whom all my things please." So, how do we bridge this gap? If we take a look at his quartet output on a timeline, we can see that there's a period of about 8 years in which he didn't write any string quartets, with the exception of one notable, albeit incomplete, work, the Quartettsatz in C minor. Written in December 1820, Quartettsatz, or quartet movement, consists of one complete movement, clearly meant to be the first of a 4-movement work, followed by a 41-measure fragment of a slow second movement that trails off mid-thought. Most of Schubert's notable instrumental works were not published during his lifetime, so it's no surprise that Quartettsatz, with its incomplete nature, wasn't brought to public light at the time. We actually have Johannes Brahms to thank here. After Franz's passing, his brother Ferdinand had preserved a collection of his documents, Quartettsatz among them. This collection eventually made its way to Brahms, who, after discovering this movement in a half, arranged for its public premiere in 1867, almost 40 years after Schubert's passing, as well as his publication in 1870. Right off the bat, with its turbulent opening, we can hear Beethoven's influence. The restlessness of C minor, with canonic entrances, each instrument chasing after its predecessor. But just as quickly after establishing the drama of C minor, Schubert deftly turns a corner, melting suddenly into the warm, lyrical second theme, now in A-flat major. This is undeniably Schubert's singular voice, modulating by a third, the texture now reminiscent of Lieder. The first violin line soars above the rollicking texture of the middle voices. Back in the world of Beethovenian contrast, though, he interrupts his song. There's a notable amount of virtuosity, with sweeping scales in the first violin, the harmonies modulating every few measures. Amongst the harmonic instability, we eventually find ourselves settling into G major, for what emotionally feels like a closing theme, and yet it's by far the longest portion of the exposition. The proportions are quite curious. For a movement in C minor, we don't really spend a whole lot of time in the home key. That's probably related to its famously perplexing feature. In the recapitulation, when we normally expect composers to re-establish a sense of home by returning to the first theme, Schubert entirely omits it. He instead chooses to bring back the first thematic material only at the very end for what would ultimately be the coda. Despite its formal idiosyncrasies, though, the power of Quartettsatz is nonetheless undeniable. Not only does it stand on its own despite its unfinished status, it showcases a wildly imaginative Schubert wrestling with both the juxtaposition and coexistence between clashing forces, between violence and love, between despair and hope, between fate and fantasy.